Not everyone gets to hear, "Stop acting like you own the place," from their new boss in the middle of a strategy meeting and turn those exact words into prophecy. What seemed like a career-ending humiliation became the spark for an elaborate revenge plan that would make the very person who uttered them, "Watch me actually," become the owner. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's making your enemy hand you the keys to their kingdom while they're being escorted out the door. My name is Rachel Carter, and at 38, I'd spent the last 12 years building something I thought was unshakable at NovaForge Systems. That Tuesday morning in March started like any other coffee at 6:30 a.m., emails by 7, and prep for the 10 a.m. executive strategy meeting where I'd present the UI overhaul project I'd been nurturing for 6 months. The boardroom on the 42nd floor had always felt like home to me, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. The sleek mahogany table where I'd pitched dozens of successful projects, the familiar faces of colleagues who'd become allies over the years. But that morning, something was different. The energy felt charged, hostile even, emanating from the man sitting in what used to be Martin Lopez's chair. Daniel Cross, our new vice president of product, 3 weeks in and already acting like he'd built this company from scratch. I stood at the presentation screen, my portfolio case containing 6 months of user research, heat maps, A/B testing results, and prototypes that our beta users had called revolutionary. My team had interviewed over 300 customers, analyzed millions of interaction data points, and created something that would genuinely transform how people experienced our software. As you can see from the user sentiment analysis, I began, clicking to the slide showing a 92% approval rating from our test group. The new interface reduces task completion time by 40%, while simultaneously, "This is garbage." The words sliced through the room like a blade. Daniel didn't even look up from his phone as he said it. "I'm sorry." I kept my voice steady, professional. He finally raised his eyes, and I saw nothing but contempt in them. This whole touchy-feely listen to the users approach, it's why this company has been stagnating. Users don't know what they want until we show them. My hands gripped the presentation remote tighter. "With respect, Daniel, our user research clearly indicates—" "Your user research," he interrupted, leaning back in his chair with a smirk that made my skin crawl, "is a waste of time and resources. We're not here to hold customers' hands, we're here to innovate." The room was silent. 20 executives, most of whom had praised my work for years, suddenly found their notebooks fascinating. "This project has been approved by the board," I said carefully. "Martin personally—" "Martin's not here anymore, is he?" Daniel's voice carried a warning. "And frankly, Rachel, you need to stop acting like you own the place. This isn't your little design playground anymore." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Stop acting like you own the place, in front of everyone, in front of my team, my peers, people I'd mentored. "Take this amateur hour somewhere else," he continued, waving his hand dismissively. "We're done here. I'll be assigning Travis to lead a real product initiative, something with actual vision instead of this focus group nonsense." Travis, the 26-year-old MBA Daniel had brought in last week, who couldn't tell the difference between UX and UI if his life depended on it. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Everyone waited to see if I'd explode, cry, or storm out. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I smiled. "Of course, Daniel, I'll archive all the research and prototypes immediately." I gathered my materials with steady hands, though inside, my heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. As I walked toward the door, I caught my reflection in the glass wall professional blazer. Confident posture, everything in place. You'd never know that inside. A fuse had just been lit. "Rachel!" Daniel called out, just as I reached the door. "Make sure Travis has access to everything by end of day. Everything." I turned, meeting his eyes directly. "Absolutely. You'll have everything you deserve." The walk back to my office was the longest of my life. Colleagues averted their eyes in the hallway. My assistant, Jennifer, started to say something but stopped when she saw my face. I closed my office door, sat in my chair, and stared at the wall covered with design awards, user testimonials, and photos from product launches. "Stop acting like you own the place." I pulled out my personal laptop and began copying files. Not the company's files, my files. The ones I'd created on my own time, with my own resources. Building the future Daniel had just called garbage. He wanted me to stop acting like I owned the place fine. I'd do something better. I'd actually own it. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in my office that afternoon, methodically backing up files. Daniel had no idea he'd just insulted one of the founding members of Nova Forge Systems. Not a founder on paper, but someone who'd been there since the beginning, when we operated out of a converted warehouse in Fulton Market. I still remembered my interview with Martin Lopez 12 years ago. I was 26, fresh from a failed startup, carrying a portfolio full of designs nobody had wanted. Martin had looked at my work for exactly 3 minutes before saying, "You don't just design interfaces, you design conversations between humans and machines." He hired me on the spot. Employee number 7. Back then, Nova Forge was just Martin's vision and a handful of believers. We worked 18-hour days, survived on takeout pizza and pure determination. I built our first design system on a borrowed MacBook, sitting on milk crates because we couldn't afford proper furniture. When enterprise clients complained our software was unintuitive, Martin turned to me and said, "Fix it, Rachel. Make them fall in love with us." So I did. I pioneered something radical for our industry, actually talking to users before designing anything, while our competitors pushed out feature after feature based on what engineers thought was cool. I spent weeks shadowing customers, watching them struggle with existing tools, documenting their frustrations. Listen first, design second became my mantra, and eventually, Nova Forge's secret weapon. The approach transformed everything. Our client retention rate jumped from 60 to 94%. Fortune 500 companies started calling us. The design team I built from scratch grew from just me to 35 specialists. We won awards, Most Innovative Enterprise UI, 3 years running. Best User Experience from TechCrunch. My methodology became a Harvard Business School case study. The current UI overhaul project was meant to be my masterpiece. 6 months ago, Martin had pulled me aside at the company holiday party. "Rachel, I'm retiring next year," he'd said quietly. "But before I go, I want to see you revolutionize our platform one more time. Show everyone why you're irreplaceable." I'd started the research in January. 300 customer interviews across 17 industries. Heat map analysis of 50,000 user sessions. Prototype testing with beta groups in Chicago, New York, San Francisco, and London. Every insight meticulously documented. Every design decision backed by data. The new interface wasn't just prettier, it fundamentally reimagined how users accomplished their core tasks. My team worked weekends, fueled by the belief we were creating something special. Sarah, my lead researcher, had said it best. "We're not just redesigning software, we're redesigning work itself." Then Martin had his heart attack in February. Survived, thank God. But his doctor ordered immediate retirement. Within a week, the board brought in Daniel Cross from a competitor. Someone with fresh vision and aggressive growth strategies. Martin tried calling me from his hospital bed, warning me to watch your back, but I was naive enough to believe my track record would speak for itself. Daniel's first all-hands meeting should have been my wake-up call. He spent 40 minutes talking about disruption and breaking things without once mentioning users or customers. When someone asked about our user-centered design philosophy, he laughed. "Users are sheep," he'd said. "Leaders don't follow sheep. They herd them." Over the next 3 weeks, I watched him systematically dismantle everything we'd built. The user research team was redundant. The design system documentation was bureaucratic red tape. Experienced product managers were replaced with his hand-picked MBAs who spoke in buzzwords but had never shipped a product. 3 of my best designers quit within Daniel's first 2 weeks. "I'm sorry, Rachel," Mark had said, cleaning out his desk. "But I can see where this is heading. He wants us gone, all of Martin's people." I'd stayed, stubbornly believing I could prove our approach worked through the UI project. I documented every decision, created extensive presentations showing the ROI of user-centered design, compiled testimonials from our biggest clients praising our thoughtful approach. What a fool I'd been. Daniel didn't care about data or customers or the 12 years I'd invested in this company. He cared about power, about rebuilding Nova Forge in his image, and that image had no room for people like me who remembered when this company had a soul. As I transferred another folder to my personal drive, I noticed something that made me pause. My employment contract from 2012 signed by Martin himself. Section 7 Intellectual Property Rights. The clause Martin had specifically added for me: any designs, research, or creative work produced outside of standard working hours using personal equipment remains the sole property of the employee. Martin had insisted on it. You're too talented to be chained to a desk. Rachel, whatever you dream up on your own time should be yours. And that's when I realized every evening, every weekend, every late night I'd spent on this project using my personal laptop, it was all legally mine. The systematic destruction of Nova Forge's culture happened faster than anyone could have imagined. Within a month of Daniel's arrival, the company I'd helped build became unrecognizable. It started with the org chart. Daniel brought in his own lieutenants, aggressive, sharp-suited executives who spoke his language of disruption and market domination. Travis Mitchell became Director of Product Innovation. Despite having zero experience in our industry, Brittany Hawkins, another Daniel loyalist, took over customer success and immediately canceled all user feedback sessions. We tell customers what they need, she announced in her first team meeting, not the other way around. The research lab we'd built, a space where designers could observe real users interacting with prototypes, was converted into a war room for Daniel's inner circle. The walls that once displayed user journey maps and persona profiles now featured aggressive sales targets and competitor takedown strategies. But the most painful change was watching how Daniel poisoned the collaborative culture we'd nurtured for years. He instituted stack ranking, pitting team members against each other. The open door policy disappeared, replaced by hierarchy and formal approval chains. The Friday afternoon design critiques where juniors could challenge seniors' ideas. Cancelled. Too democratic, Daniel had said. I need soldiers, not philosophers. One by one, Martin's original team began leaving. Sandra from engineering, who'd built our core architecture, resigned after Daniel publicly berated her for over-engineering a security feature. Tom, our chief customer officer, who knew every major client by name, was pushed out and replaced by a 28-year-old growth hacker who'd never actually talked to a customer. I watched it all from my increasingly isolated position. After the boardroom humiliation, I'd been systematically excluded from strategic decisions. My invitations to product meetings were revoked. My access to customer data was restricted. Even my parking spot, the one I'd earned after 5 years of service, was reassigned to Travis. The message was clear: Daniel wanted me gone, but he wanted me to quit. That way, he wouldn't have to pay severance or deal with potential lawsuits. It was a classic managing out strategy: make someone so miserable they leave voluntarily. My team felt the pressure too. In our Monday morning stand-ups, I could see the fear in their eyes. They knew associating with me was career suicide, yet some stayed loyal. "We're with you, Rachel," whispered Amy, my senior UX designer, after a particularly brutal all-hands where Daniel had indirectly mocked outdated design thinking while staring directly at me. The breaking point came when Daniel announced the AI Dashboard Initiative, his pet project that would supposedly revolutionize our platform with artificial intelligence. Never mind that our enterprise customers had specifically said they wanted more human control, not less. Never mind that the AI features he proposed would alienate our core user base of financial analysts who needed predictable, auditable systems. "This is the future," Daniel proclaimed in an all-company email. "Anyone not on board with this vision should reconsider their place at Nova Forge." Travis was put in charge. Naturally, his first move was to demand all my research, all my prototypes, everything from the UI overhaul project. "Daniel wants to incorporate some elements," he said, standing in my office doorway with a smug smile. "Email me everything by 5 p.m. I smiled back. "Of course, you'll have everything the company owns." Which was almost nothing, because I'd been very, very careful. Every crucial design file, every user interview, every prototype, they'd all been created on my personal MacBook, during my personal time. The contracts I'd signed with user research participants, personal contracts, not company ones. The revolutionary interaction patterns I'd developed, conceived and documented entirely outside office hours. Daniel had no idea that his push to make me miserable had actually given me the perfect paper trail. My digital footprint showed a clear pattern arriving at 9 a.m., leaving at 5 p.m. sharp, never logging into company systems after hours. Meanwhile, my personal laptop showed hundreds of hours of work on the UI project work that, according to my contract, belonged to me. I started preparing for my exit, but not the way Daniel expected. While he thought he was forcing me into a corner, I was actually building a bridge. Every insult, every public humiliation, every excluded meeting, I documented it all, not for a lawsuit, but for something much more satisfying. Because Daniel had made one crucial mistake. In his arrogance, he dismissed not just me, but the very philosophy that made NovaForge successful. He thought users were sheep, that customers would accept whatever he gave them, that relationships built over 12 years could be destroyed without consequence. He was about to learn otherwise. Summit Tech, our biggest client worth $40 million in annual revenue, had been growing increasingly frustrated with the new direction. Their CEO, Patricia Kim, had called me directly last week, bypassing the official channels. "Rachel, what the hell is happening over there?" she'd asked. "This new AI dashboard Travis is pushing. My team hates it. Where's that beautiful redesign you showed me in January?" "I'm afraid that project has been discontinued," I'd replied carefully. There was a long pause. "Rachel, are you okay?" "Really okay." "I will be," I'd said. "Soon." Patricia was smart. She understood what I wasn't saying. "Keep in touch, Rachel. Whatever happens, keep in touch." As I watched Daniel stride through the office that afternoon, barking orders and spreading fear, I felt an unusual calm. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully pushed out another piece of Martin's legacy. He had no idea he'd just armed his biggest threat. The isolation was surgical in its precision. Over the next 3 weeks, Daniel and his team systematically erased me from NovaForge's present while trying to claim credit for my past. It started subtly. My name disappeared from project credits and company presentations. The design system I'd spent 3 years building was suddenly attributed to the NovaForge team. The customer retention improvements from my user research initiatives. Now they were results of company-wide efforts. Even the Harvard case study was reframed with Daniel somehow positioned as a visionary leader who championed user-centered design, never mind that he'd been at a competitor, actively mocking our approach, when it was written. The weekly product strategy meetings moved to Tuesday mornings at 8 a.m., the exact time I had my standing vendor calls, which Daniel knew because he'd accessed my calendar. When I tried to reschedule the vendor meetings, I discovered my procurement privileges had been revoked. "New approval structure," Brittany informed me with false sympathy. "All vendor relationships now go through Travis." My team was picked apart like a carcass. Amy was reassigned to support Travis's AI project. David, my interaction designer, was suddenly needed for emergency mobile initiatives that reported directly to Daniel. Within 2 weeks, my 35-person team was reduced to 3 junior designers, all fresh graduates too new to have any loyalty or understanding of what we'd built. The psychological warfare was relentless. I'd arrived to find my office supplies mysteriously reallocated. My name was removed from the design lab booking system, forcing me to work from the noisy open floor. It claimed they needed to upgrade my workstation, leaving me with a laptop so old it crashed running basic design software. "Maybe you should consider if this is still the right fit," Brittany suggested one morning, cornering me by the coffee machine. "Daniel values forward-thinking innovators, people who embrace change." "Change and destruction aren't the same thing," I replied, pouring my coffee steadily despite my shaking hands. She laughed. "See, that attitude right there? That's why you're struggling. You're too attached to the past." The emails were the worst part. I was copied on discussions about my own projects, watching Travis butcher concepts he didn't understand. He sent out a company-wide message about the revolutionary AI-first approach that was literally the opposite of everything our research had shown users wanted. When Summit Tech pushed back, Travis blamed it on legacy thinking from previous design leadership. My allies were terrified to be seen with me. Lunch invitations dried up. The design critique sessions I'd hosted for years suddenly had 0 attendance. Even Jennifer, my assistant, was reassigned, replaced by a temp who'd been instructed to monitor my activities and report back to Daniel. "Document everything," whispered Marcus, one of the few original engineers left, passing me in the hallway. "Whatever you're planning, document everything." He was right, though he didn't know I was already 3 steps ahead. Every belittling email, every excluded meeting, every small humiliation, I saved them all to a personal drive. Not for legal action, but for motivation. Each insult was fuel for what was coming. The nadir came during the Q2 board presentation. I watched from the back row as Daniel presented his vision for Nova Forge's future, using slides that contained bastardized versions of my designs, stripped of all user research justification and packed with meaningless AI buzzwords. The board members nodded along, impressed by the bold new direction. When Patricia Kim from Summit Tech asked about user testing, Daniel actually laughed. "We're past that phase. Patricia, true innovation doesn't come from focus groups." I saw Patricia's face harden, her fingers drumming on the table her tell when she was angry. She caught my eye across the room, and I gave the slightest shake of my head. Not yet. After the meeting, I was summoned to Daniel's office. Travis was there, feet up on the coffee table, playing with his phone. "Rachel," Daniel began, not offering me a seat, "we need to discuss your future here." I remained standing, silent. "Your resistance to our new direction is becoming problematic. Travis needs full access to all your historical work, every file, every research document, every prototype. We're building the future, and we need to make sure we're not constrained by the past." "I've already provided Travis with everything that belongs to the company," I said carefully. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Everything? Every file created on company time, using company resources, yes." Travis looked up from his phone. "She's holding back. I know she is. That UI redesign had hundreds of files. She sent me maybe 20. Those 20 files represent the entirety of work completed within company parameters," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Daniel stood, moving around his desk to loom over me. "Let me be clear. Rachel, you can either be a team player and hand over everything, and I mean everything, or you can find yourself pursuing other opportunities. Your choice." I met his gaze directly. "I understand completely. You want me to hand over my personal property, created on my own time, or face termination." His face flushed. "Don't play games with me." "I'm not playing anything. I'm clarifying your request, for the record." The room went silent. Travis had even stopped scrolling. "You have 48 hours, Daniel said finally. "Everything, or you're done." I nodded. 48 hours. I'll give you exactly what you deserve." Walking back to my relegated workspace, I pulled out my personal phone and sent a single text to Clara Bennett, my former colleague now at VantageWorks. "It's time. Can we meet tonight?" The response was immediate. 8 p.m., my office. Bring everything. Daniel thought he was forcing me out. He had no idea he was actually setting me free. The revelation of my secret weapon came at 2:30 a.m. on a sleepless Tuesday night. 3 days after Daniel's ultimatum, I was reviewing my employment contract for the 100th time when the full implications finally crystallized. Section 7. Intellectual property rights. Wasn't just protective, it was prophetic. Martin had crafted it with unusual specificity. Any designs, research, or creative work produced outside of standard working hours using personal equipment remains the sole property of the employee, including derivative works and iterations thereof. But that wasn't the beautiful part. The beautiful part was my meticulous record-keeping. For 6 months, I'd maintained 2 completely separate workflows. Company email showed me as a model employee arriving at 9 a.m., leaving at 5 p.m., completing assigned tasks, attending required meetings. But my personal devices told a different story, hundreds of hours of evening and weekend work, thousands of Git commits time-stamped after hours, design files created exclusively on my personal Adobe Creative Cloud subscription. The UI overhaul wasn't just mostly mine legally, it was entirely mine. Every breakthrough, every innovation, every line of code that made it revolutionary had been crafted outside company time, the demos I'd shown in meetings. Those were concepts inspired by personal research, carefully worded in every presentation footnote. I'd even been smart about the user research. The participants had signed agreements with me personally, not NovaForge. I'd paid them from my own pocket, planning to expense it later, but Daniel's arrival had interrupted that process. Now, those interruptions were my salvation. The research data, the user insights, the testing results, all legally mine. Sitting in my home office, I pulled up the forensic timeline I'd been building. Every design file had metadata proving creation on personal hardware. My time machine backups showed the evolution of the project across my personal devices. Even my utility bills could prove I was working from home during the countless hours I'd invested. But possessing the work was only half the weapon. The other half was what Daniel and Travis had been doing with the fragments they did have. I'd been watching Travis's pathetic attempts to reverse engineer my designs from the few files I'd legitimately created during work hours. He was like someone trying to reconstruct a symphony from humming a few bars. His AI dashboard was a Frankenstein's monster of my elegant interfaces, stripped of all the psychology and research that made them work. More importantly, I documented every false claim they'd made. Daniel telling the board that the UI redesign was his initiative, Travis presenting my interaction patterns as his breakthrough innovations, Brittany claiming credit for user retention improvements that came from my research. I had emails, recordings from public meetings, even their LinkedIn posts claiming ownership of my work. The legal implications were staggering. If they launched any product using my designs without permission, it would be intellectual property theft. If they claimed credit for my research in investor meetings, it would be fraud. And I had Patricia Kim from Summit Tech as a witness. She'd seen my original presentations months before Daniel arrived. I pulled out the external hard drive where I'd backed up everything and created a new folder, Insurance Policy. Into it went every piece of evidence, every timestamp, every proof of ownership. Then I created a second folder, Nuclear Option. This one contained the truly damaging material. Screenshots of Daniel's private Slack messages I'd legally obtained when he'd accidentally shared his screen during a presentation, showing him instructing Travis to steal whatever you can from Rachel's work. The email where Brittany admitted they were trying to force me out to avoid paying severance. The recorded call where Daniel told an investor that the UI redesign was complete, when Travis hadn't even finished his amateur mock-ups. But the crown jewel was something I'd discovered just yesterday. While backing up my files, I'd found an email Daniel had sent to the board before his hiring, criticizing NovaForge's user-centered approach and promising to eliminate the waste once he was in charge. He'd specifically mentioned planning to cut the design team by 80% and outsource to offshore contractors. He'd been planning this purge before he even started. We were never going to have a chance. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. The 48-hour deadline was tomorrow at 5 p.m. Daniel expected me to cave, to hand over my life's work to save a job he'd already destroyed. He thought he had me cornered. Instead, I opened a new document and began typing. Daniel, per your request, I am providing you with a comprehensive list of all NovaForge-owned materials related to the UI redesign project. The list was short, pathetically short. 23 files, all preliminary sketches or meeting notes, nothing executable, nothing revolutionary, nothing that could actually be built into a product. Then I added a second section. Please note that the majority of the UI redesign work was completed outside of company hours using personal resources. As per my employment contract, Section 7, this work remains my personal intellectual property. Any use of these materials without my explicit written permission would constitute theft of intellectual property. I attached copies of my contract, the relevant timestamps, and just enough evidence to show I wasn't bluffing. Then I scheduled the email to send at 4:59 p.m. tomorrow, 1 minute before his deadline. The trap was set. Daniel would receive this email, realize he had nothing, and likely explode. He'd either try to fire me for insubordination or attempt to legally force me to surrender my work. Either way, he'd be admitting that NovaForge's revolutionary new direction was built on stolen designs. My phone buzzed. Clara from Vantage Works. Reviewed everything you sent. This is incredible. When can you start? I smiled, typing back, give me 2 weeks. I need to watch something burn first. Tomorrow. Daniel would learn that sometimes. When you tell someone to stop acting like they own the place, You should first make sure they don't actually own the most valuable thing in it. Clara Bennett's corner office at VantageWorks overlooked the Chicago River. A far cry from the converted warehouse where we'd first met as hungry young designers. She'd left Nova Forge 3 years ago when it became clear Martin was never going to promote a woman to the C-suite. Now, as vice president of design at our biggest competitor, she commanded a team of 50 and a budget that would make Daniel weep. "Show me everything," she said, pouring 2 glasses of wine at 8 p.m. sharp. I opened my laptop and walked her through 6 months of work. The revolutionary interface patterns that reduced cognitive load by 60%. The micro-interactions that made enterprise software feel almost playful. The accessibility features that had blind users calling it life-changing in testing. Clara was silent for 20 minutes, occasionally gasping or leaning forward to examine a detail. When I finished, she sat back and laughed. Actually laughed. "Rachel, this isn't just good. This is industry-defining. This is the kind of work that gets acquired for 9 figures. I'm not looking to sell it," I said carefully. "I'm looking to deploy it." Her eyes sharpened. "Against Nova Forge. With VantageWorks, if you're interested." Clara stood and walked to her window, staring out at the city lights. "You know what Daniel did to me, don't you, before he joined Nova Forge?" I shook my head. 5 years ago, when he was at Apex Systems, he poached 3 of my best designers by promising them equity that never materialized. Then he took their work, claimed it as his own, and fired them 6 months later. One of them never recovered. She left tech entirely. She turned back to me. "I've been waiting for a chance to return the favor." The offer she made was beyond my wildest expectations. Director of Product Design, reporting directly to her. Base salary, 20% higher than my Nova Forge pay. Full creative control over a new enterprise product line. And the kicker, VantageWorks would purchase my UI design system as an independent contractor agreement, keeping the IP in my name while licensing it exclusively. "But that's not the best part," Clara smiled. "Summit Tech's contract with Nova Forge is up for renewal in 6 weeks. Patricia Kim has been unhappy with Daniel's direction. She specifically asked me if we have anything that could replace their current system." My heart raced. "She asked you?" "We play tennis together. She's been dropping hints for weeks, waiting for me to make a move. She even mentioned missing the thoughtful design leadership Nova Forge used to have." Clara pulled up her phone and showed me a text from Patricia. "If you poach who I think you're going to poach, we need to talk." "But I need more than just you," Clara continued. "This only works if we can actually deliver. Who else can you bring?" I'd been preparing for this question. Liam Rodriguez, their best back-end engineer. He's been marginalized since Daniel arrived. Hannah Park from Customer Success, she knows every major client personally. And there's a brilliant young designer, Marcus Webb, who Daniel's been wasting on busy work. "Can you get them?" "Liam already has 1 foot out the door. Hannah's been sending out resumes. Marcus would follow me anywhere I hired him, trained him, and Daniel's made his life hell by association." Clara nodded. "Make the approaches carefully. We can't have Daniel claiming we're poaching." "They'll come to me," I said confidently. "They always do when they need career advice." And they did. Over the next week, each of them separately sought me out, desperate and demoralized. I listened to their frustrations, validated their concerns, and casually mentioned I was exploring opportunities. The hope in their eyes was immediate. "If you leave, I leave," Liam said bluntly over coffee. "I've got 3 years of equity vesting, and I don't care. This place is toxic." Hannah was more strategic. "I've been documenting every customer complaint about the new direction. 17 enterprise clients are considering alternatives. If someone were to, say, offer them a better option at the right time." Marcus was the most emotional. "You taught me everything, Rachel. Whatever you're planning, I'm in." But the real coup came from an unexpected source. Travis, in his arrogance, had been bragging about the AI dashboard demo scheduled for Summit Tech in 2 weeks. He'd posted on LinkedIn about revolutionizing enterprise software with artificial intelligence, tagging Daniel and the Nova Forge account. I screenshot the post and sent it to Clara. "He's going to demo stolen fragments of my design wrapped in AI buzzwords to Patricia Kim." Clara's response was immediate. "Let him. Patricia will recognize your work immediately, and when she asks where the rest of it is, we'll be ready with the complete version, I finished. The alliance was forming perfectly. Clara had the resources and reach. I had the designs and the relationships. Together, we had something Daniel could never understand: the loyalty that comes from respecting people's work. That night, I created a new presentation, titled Project Phoenix. It contained everything: the full UI system, the research data, the implementation roadmap, but more importantly, it contained a vision for what enterprise software could be when you actually listened to the people who used it. At the bottom of the last slide, I added a quote from Martin Lopez, something he'd told me years ago. The best revenge against those who devalue your work is to build something so undeniably brilliant that their failure becomes a monument to their blindness. Daniel thought he was pushing out a troublesome employee. He had no idea he was creating his own perfect rival. I scheduled a meeting with Clara for Monday morning, the day after my 48-hour deadline with Daniel expired. By then, he'd know I wasn't giving him my work. The war would officially begin. And I already knew how it would end. The chess pieces moved into position with beautiful precision over the next 10 days. Daniel's explosion when he received my 48-hour deadline email was apparently audible 3 floors away, according to Jennifer, who texted me despite being warned not to contact me. "He's demanding legal review your contract," she wrote. "He's convinced you're bluffing." I wasn't worried. I'd already had my own lawyer review everything. My position was ironclad. Meanwhile, I orchestrated the exodus with surgical precision. Each conversation was carefully spaced, naturally occurring, completely defensible. When Liam asked for career advice after Daniel publicly humiliated him in a code review, I simply mentioned I was exploring new challenges. When Hannah came to me in tears after Daniel blamed her for Summit Tech's complaints, I offered comfort and casually noted that other companies value customer relationships. Marcus needed the least convincing. After Travis took credit for his accessibility improvements in an all-hands meeting, he showed up at my apartment with his resignation letter already written. "Just tell me when," he said. The timing was crucial. We needed to move as a unit, but not in a way that looked coordinated. I studied NovaForge's client calendar, noting that Daniel's big Summit Tech demo was scheduled for Thursday, April 15th at 2 p.m. He'd also scheduled investor meetings for that Friday, planning to showcase the revolutionary AI-first platform that would define NovaForge's future. I set our resignation date for Wednesday, April 14th at 4:45 p.m., late enough that HR would be winding down, early enough that word would spread before the Summit demo. The chaos would be perfectly timed. But first, I needed to ensure Daniel's demo would fail spectacularly on its own merits. Through Marcus, who still had access to the development servers, I learned that Travis's AI dashboard was a disaster. The machine learning models were poorly trained, the interface was sluggish, and worst of all, it completely ignored user workflow patterns. It forced users to adapt to the AI, rather than having the AI adapt to them, the antithesis of everything Summit Tech wanted. "It's so bad," Marcus reported, that the QA team has started calling it Skynet's brain-damaged cousin. I didn't need to sabotage anything. Daniel and Travis were doing that themselves. Clara, meanwhile, was preparing our counterstrike. She'd scheduled a casual lunch with Patricia Kim for the day after the demo. "Just checking in on an old friend," she'd said. But we both knew Patricia would be furious after seeing Travis's disaster and primed for an alternative. The resignation letters were works of art, professional, brief, giving the required 2 weeks' notice, but I added one devastating touch to mine. I CC'd the entire board of directors, thanking them for 12 wonderful years, and noting that recent strategic changes have made it clear my user-centered design philosophy no longer aligns with NovaForge's direction. Liam's letter was even more pointed, mentioning ethical concerns about product quality that he could no longer ignore. Hannah documented 17 at-risk client relationships in her transition notes. Marcus simply stated he was seeking an environment that values innovation over imitation. On Tuesday night, Clara confirmed everything was ready on her end. 4 offer letters prepared, announcement of our new Enterprise Experience Division ready to go, and Rachel. She paused. Patricia Kim just texted me. She said Thursday's demo better be amazing or she's walking. Wednesday morning arrived gray and drizzly, fitting for a funeral. I walked into Nova Forge for what I knew would be one of the last times. My resignation letter printed and signed in my bag. The day proceeded normally until 3 p.m., when Daniel called an emergency meeting about the summit demo. He was panicking. Travis's latest test run had crashed 3 times, and the AI recommendations were so off base they'd recommended selling winter coats to customers in Phoenix in July. "Fix it," Daniel snarled at the development team. "I don't care if you have to work all night." That's when I knew the timing would be perfect. The dev team would be in crisis mode when the resignations hit, making it impossible to recover before Thursday's demo. At 4:30 p.m., I walked to HR, my 3 allies following at discrete intervals. We'd choreographed this precisely far enough apart to avoid suspicion, close enough together to create maximum impact. I handed my letter to the HR director, whose face went white as she read it. "Rachel, please, let's discuss this, whatever the issue is." "The issue is documented in the letter," I said calmly. "I'm happy to work through my notice period to ensure smooth transitions." Her phone started ringing, then her assistant rushed in. "We have a situation. Liam Rodriguez just resigned, and Hannah Park, and, oh God, Marcus Webb too." The HR director looked at me, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You coordinated this." "I coordinated nothing," I replied. "We're all simply responding to the same hostile environment. You might want to check your employee satisfaction surveys if Daniel hadn't canceled them." By 5:15 p.m., the news had exploded through the company's Slack. Daniel's assistant frantically tried to reach him, but he was in another investor call, selling them on a future he wouldn't be able to deliver. That night, my phone buzzed with messages from colleagues. Some congratulated my courage, others begged to know where I was going. A few warned that Daniel was beyond furious and planning to sue. But the message that mattered most came from Patricia Kim. "Heard you're leaving Nova Forge. Let's talk after tomorrow's demo. I have a feeling I'll need alternatives." I smiled, typing back, "I'll have Clara set something up." The trap was set. In less than 24 hours, Daniel would stand in front of Summit Tech with a broken product, no team to fix it, and no idea that his troublesome ex-employee was about to become his biggest competitor. He'd told me to stop acting like I owned the place. Tomorrow, he'd learn what happened when you threw away the person who actually built it. The Summit Tech demo on Thursday, April 15th at 2 p.m. was, according to witnesses, one of the most spectacular failures in Nova Forge's history. Travis's AI dashboard crashed within the first 5 minutes. When he managed to restart it, the artificial intelligence recommended that Summit Tech's financial analysts should consider careers in contemporary dance based on their clicking patterns. The interface froze during a critical workflow demonstration. The grand finale was when the system somehow deleted all the test data in the middle of showing the robust data protection features. Patricia Kim didn't even try to hide her disgust. "This is what you've been building instead of Rachel's user-centered design," she asked Daniel directly, in front of his entire team. "There have been some personnel changes," Daniel stammered. "Temporary setbacks. We're still optimizing." "I've seen enough," Patricia stood. "We'll be evaluating alternatives." By 3:30 p.m., she was having coffee with Clara and me at a quiet cafe 2 blocks away. "Show me what you really built," Patricia said without preamble. I opened my laptop and ran through the complete UI redesign, not the fragments Travis had stolen, but the full vision. Every interaction was smooth, every workflow logical, every feature backed by the user research Patricia's own team had participated in. "This is what I presented to Daniel 3 months ago," I said. The work he called garbage and amateur hour. Patricia's laugh was bitter. That man wouldn't recognize innovation if it slapped him in the face. She turned to Clara. "VantageWorks can implement this." "Rachel is joining us as Director of Product Design on Monday," Clara confirmed. "Along with the core team that built it, we can have a working prototype for Summit Tech within 3 weeks, full implementation in 3 months." "Done," Patricia said. "I'll have legal send over the contract termination notice to Nova Forge tomorrow. $40 million in annual revenue, moving to VantageWorks." But that was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, the dominoes fell in rapid succession. 17 other enterprise clients, learning that Summit Tech was jumping ship, requested demos of VantageWorks' new enterprise experience platform, my design system with a new name, Hannah, now leading customer relationships at VantageWorks, guided each one through the transition. The tech press picked up the story. Nova Forge Exodus star designer and team defect to rival, read one headline. From garbage to gold. How one executive's insult triggered a $40 million loss, read another. But the killing blow came from an unexpected source. Martin Lopez, Nova Forge's retired founder, gave an interview to TechCrunch. Daniel Cross represents everything wrong with modern tech leadership, he said. He destroyed in 3 months what took 12 years to build. Rachel Carter isn't just a designer, she's the soul of what Nova Forge used to be. The board called an emergency meeting on May 1st. By May 3rd, Daniel Cross was gone. His LinkedIn profile quietly updated to seeking new opportunities. Travis disappeared even faster. His social media scrubbed of any Nova Forge references. The sweetest moment came exactly 6 weeks after that humiliating boardroom meeting. I stood in VantageWorks' presentation room, facing a familiar audience, Summit Tech's entire leadership team. But this time, I was presenting as Director of Product Design, with my team behind me and Clara by my side. As you can see, I clicked through the final slides. The Enterprise Experience Platform doesn't just meet your needs, it anticipates them. Because we didn't just guess what you wanted, we listened. The contract was signed that afternoon. $40 million annually, with a 5-year commitment. VantageWorks' valuation increased by 30% within the quarter. But the real satisfaction came from a different source. My team Liam, Hannah, Marcus, and 6 others who'd followed us from Nova Forge gathered in our new design lab at VantageWorks. The space was everything we'd dreamed of: user testing rooms, collaborative workspaces, walls covered with actual user feedback instead of ego-driven mandates. You know what the best part is? Marcus said, admiring his new workstation. We're not acting like we own the place anymore. No, I agreed, looking at the patent applications for my UI system. The contract's making me a significant equity holder in VantageWorks' new division, and the photo Clara had just texted me, Nova Forge's stock price, down 42% since our departure. Now we actually do. Daniel had been right about one thing: I had been acting like I owned the place at Nova Forge. The mistake was his, not mine. Because when you tell someone to stop acting like an owner, you better make sure they don't have the receipts to prove they actually own the most valuable thing you're trying to steal. 3 months later, I received one final communication about Daniel. A recruiter reached out, asking if I'd be a reference for him. He was applying for a VP role at a startup, claiming credit for revolutionary AI innovations at Nova Forge. I declined politely, but I did forward the recruiter a link to the TechCrunch article about Nova Forge's collapse, with one line highlighted: the executive who killed the golden goose. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's making sure everyone knows exactly who was responsible for the failure. Stop acting like you own the place. No, Daniel, I'll do something better. I'll actually own it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment, and let's connect. If this tale of sweet corporate revenge resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts or similar experiences. Have you ever had a boss who underestimated you, only to watch you rise above? Let me know in the comments below.